Alright, here's the story. A couple of months ago, there was a knock at the door. The cop showed up at the door, had a warrant for my arrest. He said, Mr. Kane, I got a warrant for your arrest. I said, that's impossible. I hadn't had a ticket. You know, the only ticket I had, I paid off, blah, 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 whatever. He said, well, I got a warrant here for failure to appear. I said, no, I did appear. Me and my attorney, we went to court, paid my fines, did everything I was supposed to do. He said, do you have a receipt where you paid the fine? I said, I do. If you give me a minute, I'll get the receipt. Yeah, we'll get it cleared up. He said, you mind if I look around while you get the receipt? I said, yes, I do mind. He said, why not? I said, you got no business in my home. My wife is a cancer patient. She's half dressed. She has a colostomy bag and a urostomy bag. She was in the process of changing her equipment in the recliner in the living room. So I turned to walk over to my desk to get the receipt. When I turned to walk to the desk, I noticed a light moving all around the room. I turned around and looked, and this officer just walked into my home, shining a flashlight around my living room. I said, what are you doing? You can't do that. You can't just walk into my home and start searching. I mean, that's just a clear violation of my Fourth Amendment right. He said, I can do whatever I want. I said, look, you need to step outside. I mean, I know what I'm doing. I know my rights, you know. Number one, you got no business being here anyway. And I gave him the receipt to show that I had indeed showed up in court and I paid my fines, did everything I was supposed to do. Well, he wouldn't leave my living room. He stayed inside. And it got heated because he was still just walking around with his flashlight looking around. Now, over by my wife's chair, she had 2 grams of marijuana in a bag. He saw it. He saw it as he was searching. So he said, give me that marijuana. So I gave it to him. I said, now get out of my house. My wife said, officer, that marijuana's mine. I'm a cancer patient and I use it for nausea. He said, do you have a prescription for it? She said, I do not. He said, well, he's getting charged with it, and points to me. Now, that's baffled me. I don't know how he come up with that one, but he knew that it was about 2 grams of marijuana, because during the little heated discussion we were having about him needing to get out of my home, he called for backup. Well, by the time that I gave him the marijuana, the backup arrived. So he told, when he handed the marijuana to the one of the other officers, he said, yeah, it's a couple grams. Just shrugged his shoulders like it was no big deal. Now we got in his car to head to the police station. He put me in cuffs. The 2 officers that showed up for backup, they wanted to search the home. I said, no, you cannot search my home. They said, why not? If you got nothing in there, you got nothing to worry about. This is not about that. It's about you got no business being in my home. You got one officer right there that's already violated my rights by entering my home. Now the officer stood at the doorway and he said, I never entered your home. I said, you did. You know you did. My wife's right there. She knows you did. I mean, you know. It's obvious. I mean, it's like some 5th grader trying to lie his way out of something.
I asked him for time to get dressed.
Yeah. I mean, she asked him for time to get dressed, and he just, I mean, like she wasn't there, just, he's going to do what he wants to do. So, I told him they couldn't search my home. So they take me to the police station in town. Now, when they took me to the police station in town, the officer on the way there, he said, look, he showed me on the computer in the car. He said, look, see right there, failure to appear. And he showed it to me. Plain as day, FTA right in the corner of the warrant. I said, well, you got a receipt. You know I appeared. I mean, you know, so, I mean, you know, I did everything I was supposed to do. So he takes me to the city limits, and a deputy is waiting to pick me up. So the deputy picks me up to take me on to the county jail. So as he's taking me into the county jail, he asked me, you know, so what's going on, man? So I told him, I did everything I was supposed to do. I got a speeding ticket. I paid the ticket. I, you know, did everything I was supposed to do. I mean, I don't know how this came about. Somebody made a mistake somewhere. Simple as that. And that's all it was somebody simply made a mistake. But, so we get to the magistrate's office. As they were processing me in, she read off the charges. Now, the officer that violated my rights, the one that initially walked into my home and found the marijuana, he charged me with felony manufacturing marijuana. Now, this was not in several bags. There was nothing growing. There was nothing being processed. It was 2 grams of weed in a bag. Now, they charged me with a felony, and I asked him, I said, first off, he had no business being there to begin with. I'd got a ticket. I'd paid my ticket off. I came to court with my attorney. I did everything I was supposed to do. I kept my receipts. You know, I mean, he had no business being there to begin with. And she said, well, let me check this out. Let's see what's going on here. So she looks it up. She calls the clerk, and there's a lot of, you know, under the breath talking, a little whispering here, you know, trying to figure out something. Because, I mean, they knew they'd been had. So she comes out and she said, well, Mr. Kane, this is what it is. It was actually a failure to comply. You had 2 fines that you were supposed to pay that day. You only paid 1. I said, no. I paid what they told me to pay. And she said, no, you didn't. You didn't pay at all. I said, well, you know as well as I do, you can't make a partial payment to the clerk. So, I mean, you know, I know I don't have a failure to comply. I paid what I was supposed to pay. She said, no, you were supposed to pay more. I said, okay. And I said, what do I need to do? She said, well, you're going to have to pay the fine. I said, well, I paid the fine. You've got the receipt that I paid the fine. You've got the receipt with the same docket number on it that you're telling me I'm supposed to pay. She said, well, you know, nothing I can do. You're going to have to pay the fine to get out. I said, well, what about the drug charge? She said, well, that's a felony. That's going to be a $7,500 bond. I said, well, I don't have just $7,500 laying around. Now, I paid the ticket again that I knew I'd already paid, so I paid it again. And, you know, went on about my business. They locked me up, got a bail bondsman, bailed out. Now, in the process of me getting bailed out, I left, I went to work, you know, and everything. I come home, 3 days later, the exact same officer shows up with the exact same warrant. Said, Mr. Kane, I got a warrant for your arrest for a failure to appear. I said, man, you know that warrant is no good. We've already had this discussion. I mean, it was less than a week ago you were here with that same warrant. Now, we already got it straightened out. You know the warrant is fraudulent. He said, well, there's nothing I can do about it. I just serve warrants. So he takes me to jail. And it's just a repeat of what happened a few days before. So he drops me out, takes me to the city limit line, and the exact same deputy picks me up. And the deputy asked me, he said, what have you done this time? I said, man, this is the exact same thing that I was, you know, here for, you know, less than a week ago. The same thing you picked me up for. Same warrant, everything. Same docket numbers, everything. It's the same warrant. He said, well, somebody's got something mixed up, man. You need to get that straightened out. I said, well, I paid an attorney. I went to court. I paid my fines. I kept my receipt. I gave my receipt to the officer. What more do you want me to do? He said, well, maybe we'll get it straightened out at the magistrate's office. I said, I doubt it. So we go to the magistrate's office. We go in. She said, well, what are you doing here? I said, you tell me. Evidently, the warrant that you served last week that I paid for twice, that I was released on, somehow is still in the system. So, they lock me up. I go back in jail. I bond myself out. More money that I can't afford to spend. So, I bond myself out, and I go back to work. Now, a week later, the exact same officer shows up with a warrant for my arrest for a failure to appear. So, at this point, it's just not funny anymore. So he takes me to jail. We go before the magistrate. And she says, well, what have you done now? What did you do? Did you miss court? You didn't go to court? Why didn't you go to court? I said, I hadn't even had a court date yet. You know, I mean, the court date that you gave me was for the 9th. I mean, the 9th hadn't got here yet. So I go to jail. And I bail myself out again. More money that I can't afford to spend. So now, the money that I had set aside for an attorney turns into bail money. And they did exactly what they wanted to do. They got me, and they got me in a way that they knew I had them. They knew the officer knew that he had committed a felony when he violated my rights by entering my home. Now, in return, he had to charge me with a felony, and the best thing that he could come up with was 2 grams of marijuana. So he charged me with felony manufacturing for 2 grams of marijuana, which is ridiculous. And everybody knows it's ridiculous. So, I bailed myself out of jail again for a 3rd time in as many weeks. Now, I'm waiting on my court date. About maybe a week before my court date pops up, there's a knock at my door, and it's a police officer. Exact same police officer with a warrant for my arrest for failure to appear on the felony charge, felony drug charge. I said, this is getting a little bit ridiculous. This is starting to look like just plain harassment. But, nevertheless, I went to court. I got before the magistrate. The magistrate says, why didn't you go to court? With all the mess you've been through lately, why didn't you go to court? I said, my court date hasn't even got here yet. I showed them my paperwork with my court date on it, which was still, I think it was 9 days away at the time. But no, it was about a week away or something like that. But I showed her my paperwork. It says my court date is the 9th. Well, she called. No, it was the 11th. So she called the clerk. She talked to the clerk. She got off the phone. She come up to me. She said, yeah, your court date was moved back. I said, well, my court date was moved back to when? She said, your court date was moved back to the 11th. I said, my court date was moved back to the 11th. It should have been the 9th of the next month, but it was moved back to the 11th of this month, and nobody notified me. She said, well, they said the notifications were sent out. I said, well, I didn't get a notification. So she said, there's nothing I can do about it. It's a felony. So she takes me to, they lock me up. They take me to jail. I bail myself out with, borrowed money this time because, they've completely depleted me of my resources to the point that now I'm forced to get a court-appointed attorney. So I get a court-appointed attorney, which I knew was not going to work out the way I wanted it. And I go to meet my attorney. Now, when I met my attorney, he comes out, he sat down, he said, "Man, I got a deal for you. Today's your lucky day." I said, "Let me guess. The DA is willing to drop the felony and charge me with misdemeanor possession of marijuana if I'll just plead guilty to possession." He said, "Yeah, exactly." I said, "No, it's not going to happen." He said, "Well, you're not going to get a better deal." I said, "I'm absolutely get a better deal." I said, "The only deal that's on the table, the only thing that's on the table is the charges are going to be dropped completely. Altogether, they're going to be dropped. It's going to be thrown out of court. It's ridiculous. Or we're going to go to trial. And when we go to trial, if I know the officer was wearing a body cam, so I want the video to be shown. I want the video shown in court. I want to tell my side of my story to 12 of my peers. I want a real trial." He said, "They're not going to give you a trial." I said, "They can't not give me a trial. They've got to give me a trial." He said, "No, they're not going to give you a trial. I mean, this is the best you're going to get right here. I mean, that's it. I mean, you take this or, you got a mess." I said, "Yeah, I absolutely got a mess." So, I said, "Will I get to talk to the judge?" I said, "I just want to be able to know that I can talk to the judge." He said, yeah, of course you'll get to talk to the judge and, everything." I said, "Well, I want a trial. That's it. I just want a trial." He said, "Well, we'll see how it pans out tomorrow." I said, "Okay." So, we go to court the next day. We go before the judge. The DA stands up and she gives her statement. She said that the officer showed up at Mr. Kane's home to serve a warrant for failure to appear. Mr. Kane said that he had a receipt to show that he did indeed appear. Now, Mr. Kane provided a receipt, and while Mr. Kane was looking for the receipt, he had accidentally uncovered a bag of marijuana laying by the door. That's not the way it happened. I mean, that's not even remotely the way it happened. So, the judge asked me, he said, "Mr. Kane, do you understand what you are being charged with?" "I do." "Do you understand the offer that has been made to you today?" I said, "I do." He said, "And are you in fact guilty of the charges that are against you?" I said, "I am not." The judge looked at me like I was just an asshole. He looked at my attorney. "I thought you had this straightened out." Now, my attorney said, "Look, you need to take the plea. Just take the plea. You'll do a little bit of probation. This will be over with." I said, "No, I told you I'm not going to do this. I'm not pleading to anything. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm not taking a plea. It's not going to happen." He said, "Look, well, okay then." He said, "You need to sign here. Just sign this piece of paper here. Initial here, initial here, initial here. Blah, 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 blah. And we'll go from there." I said, "What is this?" As I was reading it, I said, "What is this?" He said, "This is just a statement saying that you are not admitting guilt." I said, "Okay." So I signed it. Now, granted, I should have read it, but I was already in a flustered state. So he takes me, tells me to sit down. They do their little thing. He talks to, the DA or whatever. And they hit me with 12 months of supervised probation. $180 a month for 2 grams of marijuana. 2 grams of marijuana that was not on my person, that someone else had implied ownership of, and that was found during an illegal search. So, now, I had no hope in the matter. I told the judge, "I did not do this. The information that you got is wrong. Blah, 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 blah." And they just didn't want to hear it. I mean, they were having none of it. Okay, yeah. Everybody's against you. Be on your way. So they set me up with probation. I go over to meet with my probation supervisor. So I'm talking to the probation supervisor. He said, "Can you pass the drug test?" I said, "I'm sure I can." He said, "Well, I know that you told the judge that you don't remember the last time you smoked marijuana." I said, "Yeah, this is true. I don't remember the last time I smoked marijuana." He said, "Well, if you take a drug test, if I piss you and you fail it, well then that's perjury." I said, "Well, evidently perjury only counts if it's in your benefit, because I mean everyone was begging me to lie under oath and say I was guilty. Now, I don't smoke marijuana. Now, granted, every now and then, my wife smokes marijuana on a regular basis. Well, she did. She smoked marijuana on a regular basis to keep the nausea down from, the cancer treatments and stuff. So, every now and then, I would hit it. No big deal. I would take a hit of it. But, I mean, it's never been anything that I would probably even piss positive for. But anyway, he says, now if you take this drug test, you fail this drug test, you're going to be hit with perjury, and that's a felony. I said, "Look, man, let me explain to you how I got here." So I told him the story that I just told you. And he said, well, look, regardless, I sympathize with you, your wife's sick, whatever the case may be. But the simple fact remains that if you had marijuana, then you did something illegal. I said, "No, not necessarily." He said, "Well, just having it is illegal." I said, "Man, I didn't have it. I told you I didn't have it. Someone else implied ownership of it, and it was found in an illegal search." He said, "Well, I know how it works. Either you were growing it, and in that case, you were manufacturing it, and that's a felony. That's it. You're busted." I said, "Yeah, but it wasn't growing it. There was absolutely no evidence of any manufacturing, any way, shape, or form. I took absolutely no part in the creation of an illicit substance." So he said, "Well, then that means you bought it. If you bought it, then you're buying drugs, and buying drugs is illegal." I said, "I didn't buy it." He said, "Well, that's the only way you could have come up with it." I mean, this guy's really kind of being a dick. I said, "Look, man, my wife met a girl that she was in chemo with. That girl smoked marijuana to help with her nausea. She brought some over for my wife to try to see if it would help her with her nausea. And it did, as it did, it helped her with her nausea." So, and he said, "Well, whatever the case may be." So, I take the drug test. I pass the drug test. I go on about my business. I go in for my very first meeting with my probation officer, a month later, or whatever the case is. So, then, then I got to take a piss test. And he gets to stand there and watch me piss in a cup. Which, I mean, just another piece of shit to stack on a piece of shit to stack on a piece of shit. That's just way too much shit on my plate already. So he asked me, he said, "When was the last time you smoked marijuana?" I said, "Man, I don't know." And I don't remember the last time I smoked marijuana. I mean, even when I did smoke, it was an occasional take a hit here and there. But anyway, I told him the whole case of how I got there. He said, well, I sympathize with you. I mean, if you're telling the truth." I said, "Of course I'm telling the truth." He said, "Well, all we can do is deal with what we've got going now. And what we've got going now is, you're on probation. The best thing for you to do is just go along with it and, try to, get this thing over with." But my argument was that I don't know how I wound up, how the justice system can be so backwards that I'm the one that is here being punished. Now, the police officer that was serving a fraudulent warrant, he committed a felony once he violated my rights. Now, I get to court and I'm denied a fair trial. I get before the judge and I don't even get to argue my case. So, I mean, evidently, my constitutional rights mean nothing. I'm already being treated like a criminal, and far less of a criminal than the police officer that violated my rights. It's a felony to violate someone's rights. So I'm talking to my probation officer, and I tell him the story I just told you. So he says, well, you know, we got to deal with what we got, you know, right here in front of us. I said, well, how would you feel? How would you feel if it were you? You're already struggling to get from paycheck to paycheck. All you can do to keep the doctor bills beat down, taking care of a very sick person. And now they're telling me I got to come off $200 a month for the next 12 months, along with the community service that I don't have time to do. And what were we saying?
Stop hitting the table.
So, I don't have time for the community service. I just don't. I'm working 7 days a week trying to stay on top of everything. Trying to stay on top of doctor bills, trying to stay on top of some, you know, just a baloney $200 a month for a charge that I should have never wound up with. Should have never happened. But nevertheless, it did. But now I'm in a situation to where I'm going to wind up violating this probation. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to do it intentionally. That's just the ugly facts here. I can't afford to pay $200 a month on top of everything else that I'm already paying, trying to keep doctor bills down, paying the same thing that everybody else pays, you know, just living expenses. And struggling. I mean, struggling. But this will be violated. I will eventually wind up violating it because I don't have time for community service. And I don't have money to pay them for the probation. And it will not bother them one bit to take a completely innocent person, and take me to jail and cost me my job, cost my wife her health insurance, that pays her doctor bills, that cost me my job, that pays the rent, that pays her doctor bills, pays for medication, and not to mention child support. I mean, all of this stuff, all of this, just because one rotten cop in Warsaw, North Carolina wanted to violate my rights. Share this video. Share it. Send it far and wide. I want everybody to know how people get treated in small towns.